That's my sound effect for Zoom shot. Okay. Morning.
Good morning. Здравствуй, Международное день. Happy International Women's Day.
So, how are we gonna get both of us in the frame? We gotta get smaller chairs. That's it.
But you're just going to say we got to get smaller. I
Please.
suppose we will with age.
It's just not even it. Good morning. Good morning, one and all. Um,
Yes.
oh, that's not set up, right? Oh well, we're just gonna go with that feeling. Apparently, live commentary mode is on, but you have to be approved.
Oh,
That might inhibit things and such.
well, we approve of you even if the algorithm doesn't.
If you cannot chime in this morning, I apologize. That was a button I pressed. Um. So let's move on, shall we?
Anyway,
reading reading interesting things on the screen. Well, good morning to you all. And actually, I don't think I can edit that on the fly. Dang it. Carry on, Teresa, just for a second, if you could.
well, it is International Women's Day, which, as you may know, was started in the early 20th century, actually by American socialists. I think it was 1913 or 1917. And they, of course, they had to push against the corporate hegemonists who hold sway over us even today. But the idea was enthusiastically received around the world. And in 1917, the Soviets granted women or rather Soviet women achieved the right to vote. And so it is celebrated. Its celebration and promotion really is more associated with the Soviets. And I suppose that's why it was relatively obscure in the U.S. Same sort of story as International Workers' Day. So International Women's Day is something that's promoted by the UN as well. And I believe this year they've come up with a theme every year. So I think this year's theme is inclusion. In any event, here we are. And Ani used to do a big. She would coordinate a huge International Women's Day effort every year at KBOO. And this involved a lot of cat herding.
Well, and actually, well before that. So, what International Women's Day means to me, it is a day to celebrate our unity. It is a day to celebrate women, and it's an annual check-in date to see how we're doing year to year. And when I first got to college in the mid 80s, yes, I was successful. I was able to take that off. See, thank you for talking for a moment while I could correct my errors of 3 in the morning or something like
The
it.
gift of gab.
So there I was, a college student in the mid 80s, finding out about International Women's Day, its history, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, and all of the other things that had gone into the history of this day. And I jumped right in and was on a steering committee for a citywide celebration that was centered at Portland State for years. Years while I was a student, after I was a student, until that kind of started to crumble in the late 90s as it became, maybe mid 90s, as it became sort of a more of an exercise for liberal feminism and trying to network our way to break through the glass ceiling. And there were workshops on dressing for success and competing in the corporate world. And I thought, holy shit, this is like what I've been fighting for my whole freaking life. Needless to say, I stopped attending that event. And in fact, that event stopped happening by and large. And I focused my attention on working with a 24-hour special broadcast on cable community radio, where I, in fact, helped to coordinate that for years. And participated in a lot of broadcasts. And to that end, here's a shameless plug for later today, 3 o'clock. I will be a guest on a program of Lisa Loving's to celebrate International Women's Day, there is special programming on KBOO again. And we will be talking a little bit more about this just in an interview format with Lisa Loving. And this, what am I going to talk about now? You might ask. I might ask. We're going to look at a couple of different things that are going on in the world, primarily focusing on Christian nationalism. One of the biggest threats to democracy, and certainly the biggest threat to women's health and well-being in this country. So I'm going to just sort of jump right into things, shall I?
Please jump.
So thank you for joining us on the International Women's Day 2024 edition of This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. This International Women's Day is hitting me different than pretty much any of the previous. There's so little to celebrate and so much to be absolutely enraged by. There is, of course, I cannot do anything but start off by mentioning there's an active genocide happening as we speak, right? And our international scene is witnessing this genocide in real time. The massive resistance across our country seems to be roundly ignored or batted away under some kind of both sidesism or statements that Israel needs to work harder not to kill massive numbers of Palestinians. But, you know, we are just going to keep arming them anyway because that's what we do. This genocide has at times appealed to mainstream feminism for support. And I'm going to point out to an era in December when the global protests and especially protests across this country were becoming too large to ignore. Bobbleheads of the mainstream news started asking people why they weren't speaking up against the sexual violence committed by Hamas. In fact, when U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal was being interviewed on CNN, Dana Brash, the interviewer, repeatedly interrupted her and challenged her about not speaking up against sexual violence. And why was she not speaking out against sexual violence committed by Hamas? And Jayapal kept her composure and said, I have been. I do speak up about that. I have spoken up about that. And we're committing this genocide. We need a ceasefire immediately. More than 30,000 Palestinian people have been killed since the start of this war, with well over 9,000 of those people being women. And I just want to note that on International Women's Day, an average of 64 women a day are killed in Palestine and Gaza right now. And about half of those women are mothers of families that are then being left behind or killed along with them. Pregnant women in Gaza are left with no place to give birth, no medical facilities to help, and no food to sustain themselves or nourish the children. So I just want to make sure that we actually note that horror that is happening. Since International Women's Day is international, we cannot ignore this genocide that is currently taking place and killing women, children, and men in a genocidal capacity. And while this is happening in the US, we are looking at a fascist movement wrapped in the flag and carrying the Bible. And it's threatening to sweep away our rights. It's threatening to sweep away women's rights and LGBTQ rights. It's threatening to sweep any gains we've made over the last 50 years. And so I want to focus on that really for the most of my talk. This morning, I want to look at Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is actually at the heart of this growing fascistic movement. Recent surveys are showing that about 10% of the population are strong adherents, and about 20% of the people are holding sympathetic positions. So that's about 30%, close to a third of the country are in favor of governing with a strongly fundamentalist interpretation of the Christian Bible and having that be the backbone of our nation. According to a new survey from the Public Religion Research Institute and the Brookings Institution, more than half of Republicans believe the country should be strictly a Christian nation, either adhering to the ideas of Christian nationalism or sympathizing. That comes out to be 54% in those two groups of Republicans. 30% of our population as a whole, 54% of all people identifying as Republican. We're being visited by a cat. Libby, if you're going to distract us, you might as well say hello. Say hello. No? No. Okay. She comes to comfort us in our time of sending out spiky vibes. So, I don't think you can rub your head on my notes, honey. Okay. Sorry. Cat distraction. So it's about, like I said, about 33% of the general population, 30% of the general population supporting the Christian nationalist views, about 40% of the nation being skeptical, and 30% being downright opposed to those ideas. And, I am a little bit disturbed that it's not much larger that are dead set opposed to the ideas of Christian nationalism and governing with the Bible. It's been disturbing enough to watch the promotion of the vilest levels of misogyny from the cretinous trolls of Twitter or the wretched haters of TikTok, but we're hearing the language of Christian nationalists used by judges, justices, and elected representatives who are exaggerating and manipulating culture wars into a consolidation of their power. It has managed to jump into the mainstream where it continues to grow. And I'm going to talk now about the Alabama Supreme Court decision that ruled that frozen embryos have full rights of personhood. Alabama's Chief Justice Tom Parker cites verses from the Christian Bible in his concurring opinion, tromping on any line that might distinguish the business of the state from the interference of the church. Parker wrote that frozen embryos are people, and I quote, cannot be wrongfully destroyed without incurring the wrath of a holy God who views the destruction of his image as an affront to himself. So frozen embryos made in God's image. That's great. It should be noted that Parker was a protege and closely allied with Roy Moore. You might remember Roy Moore from Alabama court history. He was the Chief Justice that lost his job because he refused to take down a large granite 10 Commandments from the courthouse that he had installed, in the state judicial building. I guess not the courthouse, the state judicial building. Refusing to take down the 10 Commandments when ordered by the federal authorities, he was then, removed. I'm remembering he was also found to have a thing for teenage girls that came out a few years later in the Me Too movement. But, that's just kind of holy, I guess. Parker is a big supporter of the 7 Mountain Mandate, and that puts forth that Christian, particularly conservative fundamentalist Christians, should be the leaders in the 7 pillars of our society. Those are namely the government, family, religion, business, education, media, and arts and leisure. In a recent interview on Fresh Air, Terry Gross interviewed former Christian nationalist Bradley Unrishi. He's a professor of religion and author of Preparing for War, a critique of the movement and its impact on American democracy. In that interview, Unrishi says that Christian nationalists' goal is not to simply reflect the character of Christ on earth and in a way that upholds his glory and his teachings, but in fact, their goal is to have absolute authority and power, to consolidate absolute authority and power in the governance, in the running of American society, from the political to the family. On January 30th, Speaker Mike Johnson, pardon me, I'm getting ahead of myself. Unrishi says that the goal of the Christian nationalists is absolute conquest. Trump's rhetoric of being chosen by God to save our nation and to fight like hell and to be, quote, your retribution, all speaks directly to Christian nationalists who recognize the importance of having a president be in their influence, be beholden to them to lead this nation into their vision. And it's further codified in things like Project 2025 and other documents that are out there in the, that we can access now and we can see the plan. And that's why I'm going to say defeating Trump is really our number one goal right now in this country, because things get no better, right? Under Trump, things get far worse fast. And I'm not going to say things are great now, because they're not. Not a giant Biden fan. But I can say that things will become so much worse with the basically this piece of the puzzle that needs to happen for the conquest to be realized that the Christian nationalists have been dreaming up and scheming up for years. On January 30th, Speaker Mike Johnson invited a Christian nationalist pastor to give the opening prayer in the House of Representatives as a guest chaplain. That was Jack Hibbs. According to Media Matters, Hibbs is a pro-Trump Christian nationalist pastor who's built a right-wing media profile through interviews on Fox News, Newsmax, and others. His weekly commentaries have aired on Fox Business, and he's campaigned openly about excluding LGBTQ students in public schools and any influence of LGBTQ reality. He suggested that the growing public acceptance of LGBTQ people is evidence that humanity is living in the last days, right? And he loves to sort of bring forth that apocalyptic vision of we are in the end times. It's time to get holy and righteous. He labels trans people satanic, and he frequently warns his followers of a coming antichrist. Hibbs defends the January 6th insurrection and has defended that violence as, quote, it's what you get when you eject God from the courts and from the schools. Right. So this is the dude that Speaker Mike Johnson thought, yeah, we're going to give him the floor to pray for our country. We're going to give him the floor in the guest chaplain program. Because why not? When you are that, when you're that close to Mike Johnson's heart, you know,
in a country that has no establishment of religion and no prohibition of religion stated in its First Amendment, why do they have to have a chaplain address? You know, why do they have to have religion in the Assembly of Congress at all? You know, what good can it do? It's a concession that goes back to old 1950s of the constant pressure from these same groups.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's when Under God got inserted into the Pledge of Allegiance too. So Hibbs, back to Hibbs. Hibbs has also used bigoted rhetoric. Hibbs has also used bigoted rhetoric against trans people, Muslims, and Jewish people, often connecting the groups to supposedly imminent end times. He's described a war between Israel and Hamas as another sign of the end times, and as an opportunity to convert Jews to Christianity. All right. He's been on Charlie Kirk's shows and telling his listeners that they must look past the sins of Israel and the sins of the Jew and give them the hope of Jesus, all while using anti Muslim rhetoric and likening Islam to a death cult. So, additionally, recently, Hibbs has been speculating that the US is on the brink of civil war. Now, why is that, one might ask? So, we've certainly come a long ways from the Republican Party that wanted a government small enough to drown in a bathtub. Remember that? Now, the new mega loving Christian nationalist fueled GOP wants the government to be in your bedroom, in your bathroom, and in your doctor's office. So they want to eliminate all references to LGBTQ communities in schools and a removal of all books that refer to sex, or LGBTQ identities in school libraries, leading some districts, and we talked about this on a show recently, to actually remove even the dictionary and the Encyclopedia Britannica because librarians are afraid of becoming fined, of losing their jobs, of this new wave of repression and censorship. In a recent, I'm sorry,
That's just too much, don't you think, Liz?
Libby seems just needing to be with us this morning. As, like I said, man, she is the most sensitive cat to when we're a little hyped up. She is ever present. Thanks, Libby. In a recent article by Robert Reich published in The Guardian, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said that party leaders need to be more responsive to the base of the party, which she claimed is made up of Christian nationalists. And in that one instance, she doesn't seem to be wrong. We need to be the party of nationalism, she said, and I am a Christian and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists. A growing number of evangelical voters view Trump as the second coming of Christ and see that the 2024 election is a battle not only for America's soul, but for the salvation of all mankind. Many of the Trump followers who stormed the Capitol on January 6th carried Christian symbols and invoked God and Jesus. The U.S. Supreme Court cut down the guarantee to access medical care to end pregnancies, whether or not it was viable, in their landmark 2022 decision of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. At the core of that case was a challenge to a Mississippi law that would ban abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. That case marked the first time the court actually considered the constitutionality of a pre-viability abortion ban since Roe was enshrined. Mississippi asked the court not to just uphold the abortion ban, but to overrule Roe versus Wade, and that to come out and say that there is no constitutional right to abortion. In Alito's draft decision, he quoted Matthew Hale. Matthew Hale is a 17th century jurist who conceived the notion that husbands cannot be prosecuted for raping their wives. He sentenced women to death as witches. And even in the 17th century, his misogyny stood out as kind of pointed, kind of even more so than the rest of them. Kind of the worst of the bad lot, right? So, of course, that's the dude that Alito is quoting in his draft of the decision. That's the mindset. That is what is, in fact, how do we say, that's who seems reasonable to Alito. And I think that that is so telling.
He's an angry man. I mean, we don't talk about it much, but he's clearly an angry man. He
Absolutely.
was scared by a woman as a child, I guess. I don't know.
I don't even know. The Dobbs decision marked the first time that the Supreme Court removed a fundamental right. Since that decision nearly 2 years ago, 14 states have now outlawed or banned abortion, with lawmakers severely restricting access to services in additional 10 states. So that's 24 states where it's hard or impossible to get an abortion, to receive abortion services. And again, just to remind folks uh, that we have seen cases in uh, Ms. Cox from Texas, Ms. Watts, cannot remember the state that she was in, where she was actually put before a grand jury uh, to defend herself because she miscarried at home after being turned away by a hospital. Cox, of course, was the woman who, guest of Joe Biden's State of the Union address last night, the woman from Texas who's very much wanted pregnancy, was deemed non-viable and was told by her doctors it needed to be terminated or her own health and future fertility were at risk. And she had to leave the state, excuse me, in order to actually uh, get that get access to that necessary medical procedure. More than half the United States requires a pregnant person to undergo biased counseling services before attaining abortion. It's more than half the states require crisis pregnancy counseling. The reason I've focused so much time and attention on talking about the threat of Christian nationalism, it should be really clear. The goals of political and Christian power uniting for absolute control and power is antithetical to democracy and human rights. It has had significant impact on reproductive health care, control of our bodies, whether we're able to become pregnant or seeking, whether we're allowed to terminate a pregnancy or even to become pregnant if, in fact, IVF is needed. And there's so much more. There's the schools banning books and curriculum that affirm LGBTQ identities, that affirm students who may be questioning their gender, or in fact, students that want to know more about sex so that they can use birth control correctly and protect themselves from unintended pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases. Those are all right out the table with Christian nationalists and fundamentalists coming to power. The Supreme Court has stated that the Dobbs decision actually said that there is no constitutional right to privacy, and using that reasoning, Justice Clarence Thomas has said that he believes the court could look into cases involving gay marriage as well as contraception. Because after all, if we don't have a guaranteed right to privacy, I guess the court just gets to decide who we bed down with, what bathrooms we use, what we can read. Yay, American freedom. Tastes like freedom, right? We certainly come a long ways, again, from the Republican Party that wanted to drown government in a bathtub.
Well,
So,
they'd still like to drown any rational redistribution of wealth by the government in a
oh,
bathtub.
you mean social programs,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, yeah. What else do I want to say? I have flipped the page backwards. Right. Oops. So I just want to end my how do we say I'm rather upset views by looking at a different social phenomenon that we have going on at the same time and kind of mixed in a little bit with Christian nationalists, and that is the trend of the uh, misogynist influencers in the mode of Andrew Tate, certainly one of the loudest and most extreme. And in the last few years, they've actually gained quite a lot of inroads,
Whole nation of tater tots.
breaking through some social programming to, excuse me, to claim your alpha male birthright. It's making inroads in the minds of young men and boys so much that long-time teachers in England and Great Britain have complained that they're seeing levels of disrespect and unruliness in young male students that they'd never seen before, with some students as young as 11 years old telling their female teachers they didn't have to listen to them anymore, as women could not tell men what to do. An 11-year-old boy saying that to a grown woman, I'd be hard pressed to know what to do in that situation. I mean, there's the idea of laughing in their face. There's the idea of saying, "No, sit down, you snotty nosed brat." It's what, but this is what's happening, right? They are being given the red pill by the tater tots, and there's a whole new crop of misogynist crap in social media that we see with, well, as I call it, patriarchy Twitter. You can find references all day long to the importance of finding a high value woman with a low body count and other fine frames for courting and romance. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? I've got ideas, but I think I should probably let Teresa talk. Thank you for joining me on this, my day of ranting.
That was a good rant. Well, I like to remind Tater Tots and others who mentioned the red pill that the whole idea was cooked up by the Wachowski sisters, who are transgender women. Say, do you mind if I hand you a cat? She's currently sitting on my notes.
I'm just going to do this for a while with our camera. Whoops.
Whoops.
Yeah. Hand me a cat.
Come over here.
And you get your notes.
And the doggy's here now. Hi, doggy. And I want to ask you, am I a woman?
Yes.
Thank you. I asked that because there have been millions of dollars spent in denying the dignity, reality, and healthcare of transgender persons. We are being erased because well, at the core of it, the very rich people who promote this sort of demagoguery needed a demon. And trans women are at the point of their ire right now, and they are going around and they're convincing people that all transgender healthcare is evil and offends, as the judge might say, a holy God. And they're making progress for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is that they simply have the money to promote this crap and to put pre-written legislative pieces out to the various legislatures in the states, and to support the promotion of those bills and to lionize the people who support this attack with commercials. So money is behind this. And when I say money, I mean the Koch brothers very much were funders of this. They go back to the Pacific Legal Foundation, which in 1973 began supporting things that were important to very rich people, like, as they claimed, smokers' rights, by which they meant, of course, tobacco industry profits rights, which weren't rights. All of this comes in the context of a nation that has been denied access to the principles of civics. Since I was a kid, that education became in the 21st century, I want to say downvoted. We didn't use downvoted back then, but it became de-emphasized. And I was taught a civics class in my high school, but it had been reduced to a part of a history class instead of being taught by itself. So my entire class's grasp of civics was lodged somewhere in their concept of the Napoleonic era. It's not something that they went out into the world with a firm grasp on. Nevertheless, they had heard of it. The attack on education, the teaching to the test, for generations now has produced a huge portion, the majority actually, of the electorate is simply, and I do not mean to be offensive, simply grossly ignorant of the American Constitution and of civics. And so the idea that democratically, it's okay just to promote one religion over all others and to create a theocracy, a Christian fascist republic, is appealing to people who do not understand that this sort of machination can be turned against them easily, and that it is a betrayal of very solid principles that we had all agreed upon, that we find slipping from our grasp now. The Pacific Legal Foundation was a big part of it, but now they call themselves things like the Family Rights Council, the American Principles Project. Steve Miller promoted his attack on transgender people, calling it America First Legal. And they are spending hundreds of millions. This is ongoing. The number of pending and passed legislation, pieces of legislation going out in the states is in the hundreds and increasing because this works. And so I started out saying, "Am I a woman?" Because there's a long shadow cast now in the concept of a transgender woman. We had better progress in acceptance in the public eye a decade ago than we do now, and it's something that I can see. It's a vibe I can pick up as I go around, even in Portland. Even if I just go a little bit east, I can see how much people are affected by these jackass ideas, these anti-science ideas. And Biden said last night, though, that he's got our back. So that's encouraging. So and that raises a moral question: how much should I be encouraged by someone who is actively promoting genocide in Gaza? Someone, Biden doesn't seem to understand that Gaza is his Vietnam. He is to Gaza as Johnson was to Vietnam. And that's just a practical consideration, aside from the moral consideration, which, is utterly putrescent and unbearable. So what do we do with that? We are presented in the upcoming election with choice between genociders. Trump is going out of his way to say that you encourage Israel to kill even more people. So evidently, the struggle has to be pretty much outside of the electoral at this point, which doesn't mean there isn't a huge way to struggle against genocide. And I just want to be very clear that Ani and I, of course, are foursquare against what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, I am somewhat encouraged that Kamala Harris has actually stated far more clearly, far more plainly, that there must be a ceasefire and that Palestinian lives must be protected. Maybe that is this administration's answer to Joe seeming not to be able to get those words out of his mouth. Last night, he did say that, there's going to be this rush of making a port to get aid directly into Gaza, which is desperately needed. But as a few folks have pointed out this morning, that's sort of just an admission that he cannot actually even get Israel to stop their killing campaigns long enough to allow U.S., their biggest ally and military funder, to have actually a setup for relief, Gazan relief. So that was just sort of a tell, and it was kind of pathetic. Frankly, it was just kind of pathetic. So, but what do we do, right? When we got a choice between two folks that are well past any kind of moral compass when it comes to Gaza or genocide. Okay, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm saying this because of the belief from Christian nationalists that Trump is their retribution and that they cannot wait to bring it on, civil war in America, so that they can, in fact, finally bring the flag and Bible together to rule all aspects of our lives. It is of utmost and paramount importance that we do actually vote for the other guy, right? I've never, ever advocated the voting for the lesser of two evils before. I take that back. I did in 2022. Not 2022, 2020 as well.
It's something we have to acknowledge from time to time because we are under this way. We do not have the power
Well,
to have.
we don't have representational democracy. Let's face facts. We just don't. But that said, there is no scenario, none, zero scenarios that I can come up with where we fare better under a Trump presidency. Zero scenarios that, if we're concerned about genocide, Trump is not going to stop that genocide. If we're concerned about uh, despots around the world having a green flag to go further and expand their despotism, Trump waves that green flag, as in the statements made just a few weeks ago about how he invites Putin to just do whatever he wants to the NATO nations that aren't paying up for military, their share of the military NATO budget. What in the hell is that? Right? To closely align yourself with a defenestrating monster like Putin, and to say, yeah, I want to be more like that guy.
Well, that goes back
I'm
to
sorry, it's just like we've seen it, right? I mean, yeah, it goes back to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
Oh, it's okay. It just goes back to the fact that Putin's obviously got something on him.
Obviously,
clear. You can see that in their body language.
Obviously, and I think that it's important to note that Putin's war against LGBTQ communities has been brutal, and Trump's people are looking to bring more of the same here. So I get it. It is it's pathetic. It's a pathetic choice to have to make. I wish I could say vote our dreams and not our nightmares, but the nightmare is real, and it is upon us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how, what we do need to do, besides sort of screwing up our just doing it and just voting for Biden, who I am going to say has had many, many excellent programs under his tenure. I know people who have had their lives changed by having student loan debt forgiveness. I, certainly uh, appreciate his efforts to support unions and union workers, and to speak for the middle class in a whole lot of ways. Those things are are good, and I'm not going to pass them up. Uh, that said, other things not so good. Um, so what do we do? We have to power up, right? We have to actually, each of us, become our most powerful selves, and we have to link up with each other. We need each other. We need unity. We need solidarity. We need it across class lines. We need it across race lines. We need it across LGBTQ, straight, and every other possible permutation of gender identity and sexuality that may exist. We have to bring cat lovers and dog lovers together. It is important, it is imperative that we really uh, unite and defeat Christian nationalists in each and every election. Remember, they are also running folks for state legislators, for school boards, for local offices, and this is a part of their plan to absolutely shift the nexus of control. And I'm just going to say that anytime you get the Bible and the flag together, it doesn't go well for the rest of us. You can take it as far back as Constantine. Under this sign, you will conquer, and he did. And again, under the papal bulls in the 15th century, saying, "Go forth," the Pope saying, "Go forth and commit genocide against the heathens, for they don't really count as people, and you're bringing all the treasure and glory back to a Christian nation for the glory of God and the Queen of Spain."
I'd like to thank John, Tat, and Jabara for the comments.
So I was just, putting out there that it's not going to go any better for us this time either. That these things must be kept separate. That's why the Constitution had that First Amendment, right? And it's just frankly got to be our focus.
Yeah. Well, I guess, long term to educate people, period, and to educate people on civics. But also, I mean, my thoughts on the immediate crisis are to, unfortunately, support the Democrats, as poisonous as as immoral as their policies are, in an attempt to utterly crush the Republicans. I think there's a possibility to drive them out of both houses. And then, I would like to see them crushed further to the point that they become pariahs, and in my future, the Republicans are pariahs, and then we can split a left faction out of the Democratic Party and start having some actual choices in politics. But I don't see it happening before November. Unfortunately, I just have to acknowledge that they have the power at this point, and I could complain a lot about the people who have
Who's
been.
they?
They
There's a
meaning
lot
the Democratic Party has the power.
You're using pronouns,
Yes.
honey. Pronouns.
And they are wielding their power, and at this point they don't care. But I think we can make them to care, especially if we can crush the Republicans, who, as we have been discussing, have lost sight of what a democratic nation is and really don't want to be bothered with it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. We are in a fight for our future, and it's just important that we realize that and that we act accordingly. So I want to remind folks, if you are watching us, please hit that like button, hit the notification bell while you're at it, so that you can know anytime we are on. You'll get a reminder. So go ahead, please do that. And also subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe now. We've had more subscribers lately, and that pleases me. The word's getting out. Please do share this with your friends and family and let them know that we exist here on Friday mornings, providing, some rant, some maybe no rant control, some cats, some political analysis, and some news. So, with that, the question I had for the cards was, what do we need? What attitudes? What do we need to embody in this next week? Oh, watchers and listeners to this program, to help change this dynamic, to help us bring about the end of the march of Christian nationalism. And we get the Knight of Cups, and we get the Ten of Swords, and we get the Three of Cups inversed. What does this all mean? Well, the Ten of Swords, I'm thinking, is pretty much where I'm at, and maybe you are too. It's that card that's like, man, you're at the end of your rope. You have had too much stress. You have seen too much. You know too much. And you need to bring it back down a peg. It is the idea that there is a lot of information and little of it good, that your analysis has been put to the test and you are stressed. The Knight of Cups, on the other hand, tells us to get into our feelings, to really start undoing some of that stress, acknowledging our feelings, sharing our feelings with others, and exploring, going out and exploring with wisdom, sort of an internal wisdom as our guidance, exploring our feelings and helping to connect with each other. And the Three of Cups inversed really tells us to pay attention to who we are with and what we're doing. We need to make ourselves, we need to pump ourselves up. We need to fill our lives with people that are supportive of us and our ideas. We need to have a fullness of heart and to really gather folks into our extended families so that we can move forward together. Is a little cautionary tale around being careful that you are not squandering energy through escapism, that it's good to relax, it's good to have fun with each other, but also to remember that we are in sort of a serious crunch time. That's the cat hanging by the nails on the screen door card, and that we need to party with purpose, that we need to bond and come together, but in a way that um, enhances our quests for social change and justice, and not to diminish them through superficial friendships, through excessive escapism, and that sort of thing. So gather close ones to you, make plans for community actions, and move forward. That is the card reading I have for this International Women's Day 2024. Anything else?
No, I want to thank you for joining us. And as I said, thank you for the comments. I do like to read those, even though I need to get my eyes worked on. I have to read them after the fact, otherwise I have to hold up my glasses
don't
like
do that.
this. Oh, come on, you don't think it looks cute?
No, no, don't do
that. So I will be reading the comments, and I think that means it's time to say goodbye.
It is time to say goodbye. If you are watching this later on Team Replay, please leave your comments below. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you are doing to try to stave off American fascism, Christian nationalist style. It is the fight for our future. It's the fight for our lives, and it is coalescing around us right now. So organize, stay focused, love each other, support each other, and we'll see you next week.
And then I dramatically whip off my glasses and say, "Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea."
3 o'clock this afternoon, KBOO, 3 o'clock this afternoon is the time that Lisa and I take to the airwaves for much more of the same. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thanks again.